Hi, this is Frankie from AboutScript. In this video, we're going to do something a little bit different than we've ever done before. Usually we just do some code stuff, we open a text editor, and we just, well, make awesomeness happen. But in this time, we're going to use a different program that's not really code related, although you can do some code related stuff with it. What we're going to learn how to do is use Blender. And in this video, I'm going to go over all of the basics. Usually people split up a tutorial about how to use Blender into 50 parts, but I'm just going to barely touch on everything, and hopefully you can then go and watch a video that specializes in it, and you'll already have a basic idea what it is. This is basically to get you started in Blender so you can understand how to use it, and most importantly, understand how to interpret videos that you watch about Blender, just so you have the basic idea of it and can get going. So, what we have here is a simple animation that we're going to be creating. To make this, we need to use models, we need to use rigs, we need to use animation, textures, materials, lighting, cycles, and modifiers, and I don't even know what else I'm forgetting, but there's quite a few different parts to this, and we're just going to skim over all of them. So as you can see, it just does a very simple animation. Oh, and also inverse schematics, which is usually considered an advanced topic, but we're going to take a simple look at it. So to start up, you're going to need Blender, so go to blender.org and download it. On the download page, just pick your version that you have and go ahead and install. Once you're done with that, we're going to go into Blender and you're going to go File, New. Or alternatively, you can go Load Factory Settings. Now, once you have this is your basic view to Blender. We're going to just learn some of the basic commands that you can do. But before I can do that, I need to go into the user settings and enable something that'll make the video a little easier for you to watch. Okay, so now we will be able to see what I'm pressing when I'm pressing it. Apologize, my computer seems to be going a bit slow right now. Not entirely sure why, but to help it go a little faster, I'm going to close out of some of this stuff. I guess we'll have to restart Blender. Well, back here, you see we're at our default scene again. Okay, so I have to go enable screencast keys, which shows you what I'm pressing. Okay, so now we have screencast keys working. What we have here is we just have our default scene. And you see what I'm doing right here is I'm zooming with the middle mouse wheel. You will need a middle mouse button on your mouse as well as a number pad on your computer to effectively use Blender. There are ways to do it without it, but it's very painful, just to put it simply. So we have our scene. You notice there's three things in it. We have a cube, which is often called the default cube because it comes every time you start up a new Blender file. You have our camera over here, and we have our light. If we want to select one of these, we right-click on it. To select multiple, you can shift right-click on them, and then you can right-click on something else to deselect it. Pressing A either toggles having nothing selected or everything selected. If you want to look around the view, you hold the middle mouse button and move the mouse, and you see we sort of orbit around whatever's in the center. If we want to put something else in the center, we select it and press the number pad dot. Make sure you have number pad lock on. Sorry, I seem to be stuttering a bit. And now you see we orbit around this instead. So we're going to go back to our cube here, and we're going to do some basic manipulation of it. So if you want to move it, you press G for grab, and you see we're just moving it around all willy-nilly. If we don't want to move it around all willy-nilly and we want to move it around all strictly, I guess, you can press one of the letters of the axes. So that's X, Y, and Z, if you remember geometry. So if I press Z, it's our up and down one. X is our horizontal, and Y is our vertical. Control Z undoes something, Control Shift D Control-Shift-Z redoes it. I must be tired or something, I don't know. Anyway, you see on here we have these axes drawn out. We have the green one, which is our y, and the red one, which is our x, and the blue one is our z. You also see that we have these on the object itself, which means that we can just drag these by clicking on one of the handles, and we can position our object that way. If you are grabbing something and you didn't mean to grab it, instead of just clicking and then hitting undo, you can just right-click your mouse button and it'll undo the operation before it even finalizes. So we're going to get started. We have to go into our user settings and enable another add-on. User preferences, add-ons, and over here we're going to type Rigify. And then click this little checkbox. And then we can close it. Note that your user preferences don't work like most programs, where when you open a new blend file, they're back to how they were before. If you want to save your current blend file, that includes everything in the scene and all that, you can hit Save as Default. That also saves your settings and, well, everything else. If you pull this out like this and you save your settings, it's going to be like that next time you open Blender, which can be useful if you like having a default scene. Pressing Z puts us in our camera view, 7 in our top, 1 in our front, 3 in our right. If you don't remember these, go down to the View menu over here in the bottom left corner, and you can click any of them you like and also see the hotkeys for a review. How we can go to our front view by pressing the 1 on the number pad. If you press Control 1 on the number pad, you go to our back view. Same as Control 7 is our bottom, and Control 3 is our left. Go back to the camera view, and then we're going to go to the front view. If you want to toggle between solid and wireframe, tap Z. See we're toggling. Notice that we have perspective. If you don't want perspective, which is usually easier to edit without, press 5 on the number pad and you get that. To pan around, hold Shift and use the middle mouse button. And you should probably just watch that little bit again, because these are all the shortcuts we're going to need for this video. Oh, 2 more. R, rotate something. By default, it rotates around wherever your current view is. So if we went like this, we're rotating around that. If you go to the top view, you're rotating around that. Just like how you can constrict it with grab, you can say, I just want to rotate around the X. And then we're just rotating around the X-axis. Scale works the same way. We can scale something like this, or just the X, the Y, the Z. Also, if you want to not have something move on an axis but move on all the others. For example, we're scaling but we don't want to scale on the Z. Hit Shift Z, and then we just scale on the X and Y. Cool little effect there. So now we're going to get into our actual character. So we're going to hit Shift A to add something. This is where you add anything to your scene that you want. You can add a cube, a sphere, a cone, a monkey. I didn't do that, but that is an option. We're going to click Human Meta Rig, which is enabled if we enabled Rigify. If you haven't enabled Rigify, then you're not going to have that. Now we have this skeleton here, which is pretty cool. And we're going to right-click on our cube, and we're going to make this the start of the head. So what we're going to need to do is scale it down. Oh, sorry, first, I put it into edit mode, which you see down here what mode you're in, and tab switches between edit and object. Object, edit, object, edit. So we're going to go into edit and scale our guy down to whatever size we think a head should be. Then we're going to move it up on the Z-axis and press the dot on the number pad to zoom in. We want to put it right above this vertex in the bone. Now we're going to go to face select mode. You have 3 modes that you can select things in. You can select one vertex, you can select an edge, or you can select a face. We'll be using faces most of the time as they're the most useful. It helps to click right on these dots, because if you don't, you can click through faces and get to the back. Or you can put it into solid mode, which by default turns that off. You can toggle it with this little thing down here. You see how now we can see back faces. But we don't want back faces right now, so we're just going to do that. Now, to start building our model, we're going to use a very basic tool called extrude. So you hit E to extrude. Most things in Blender are phonetic. And then you see we're making our neck here. We're going to scale it down to whatever size you think your neck should be. It doesn't really matter, it's whatever you want to do. And then we're going to move it up a little bit and extrude again. I'm not really liking how this is coming out, so I'm going to go back a few steps. And here, I'm just going to extrude a little bit and then scale it down. I want it to be a very sharp curve into my neck. And just keep looking around the view and see how it looks from all different angles. And then extrude a little bit, and then extrude a little bit more, and this is going to be our shoulders. And we're just going to scale on the x-axis for now. And you see we have our arms here, so we're just going to extrude so that we have enough of a face here to make an arm. Then we go back to our front view, and all we're going to do right now is just make extrusions until we get to one of these joints in the bone. Extrude, extrude, shift middle mouse button, go down a little more, and then we're going to stop right about here. Now we have arms and legs we need to make, and everything else is pretty much done on our model. Hit Control R to go into loop, slide, and loop, cut, and slide, I believe is what it is. A lot of the things like translate, rotate, scale are also available over here in this menu if you forget what the shortcuts for them are. So we want to go to Control R, and using the middle mouse button, you can scroll up the number of cuts that you do. So we're just going to have 2 cuts. If you move the mouse around, you can see you can cut different places. We want to position the mouse so that we're cutting like this. It's sort of guessing work, and you just learn how to do it eventually. There's no real method to it. All right, so we already have a face for our arm. When you go into loop, cut, and slide mode, it switches you to edge mode, so we want to go back to faces. Select the one on the side, select this, just to see that we have faces there and they're the right size and everything. Now we're going to use a little trick to make half of our work go away. We're going to press Z to go into wireframe, and then with our face select, with our vertex select, you're going to go just a little bit to the right of the middle of your mesh. Click B, and then drag like that. Then we're going to hit delete and choose faces. Now you're probably saying, wait, now I only have half of a mesh. Where'd the rest of it go? Well, we deleted it, and now we're going to use something called a mirror modifier. And now we have the other half back. And the cool thing about this is that when we come down here and start extruding our leg, it just automatically goes on the other side too. And again, we're just extruding to wherever the joint is. Strange legs, but that's okay. Extrude down. And we're not going to bother making feet right now. Now we're going to do the same thing for the arms. We can go into the top view and extrude out a little bit just to make a little bit of a shoulder because these arms are really strangely shaped. And then we're going to extrude again and rotate again and extrude again and go to the front view because even though it looks good in one view, you can see it doesn't mean it looks good in any other views. All right, now we have these up here, and there's no real easy way to select them other than going into vertex mode and pressing the C button on your keyboard, and you can just click on them. It kind of highlights things like this. You just hover over them while holding down the left mouse button, and you select them. So we're just going to select these and push them down and see if there's any other adjustments we need to make on this before we continue. And it doesn't look like we do. So now we have these extra bones in here because we're not doing hands and feet and fingers and all that crazy difficult stuff in this video. So we're going to hit A and then C again and select these little bones on the hands. with your middle mouse button in C, you can make the selector smaller or larger. You want to go to the side view and select these, this, and delete. And then we're just going to have to manually select these and delete them. Delete, delete. Remember using the right click to select bones. And that looks pretty good. Now you want to look around and see if there's any parts where the bones aren't near vertexes, because if they're not, what we're going to do next isn't going to work very good. Okay? So we could just take this and move it up a little bit, making sure to just select the tip. And, it's not really important. It's close enough. So now we're going to save. You always have to save. I don't know why I didn't save sooner. We're going to save this as dancing guy. And if you hit enter, it automatically inserts the .blend extension, and then hit enter again. So now what we have is a guy and some bones. So what we're going to do is we're going to click on our guy in object mode. Remember tab to switch back and forth. And then shift click on our armature, which is what the bones are called, and hit Control P. Now we're going to do armature deform with automatic weights. Okay? And so now it seems like a good time to test this out. Click on our armature, and then go into pose mode, which is also Control Tab, and start grabbing some things and moving them around. Pretty cool. We can move our legs. If we go into object mode, we can see it a little bit nicer. And there are some minor glitches with it, but that's sort of to be expected. So you can move his head and do all sorts of fun stuff like that. Now, this is something that's often considered an advanced topic, so people would never really include it in a beginner video, but I'm going to do it anyway. So we're going to hit Shift A, and usually that adds various kinds of objects, but when we're editing an armature, it just adds bones, because that's all armatures have. Then we're going to right click on the tip of our hand and hit Shift S, which is our selection menu, or as it calls it, the snap menu. And we're going to say cursor to selected. So we have this thing called the 3D cursor, which if you just click, it goes wherever you click. And you can set it to certain points, and you can orbit around wherever the 3D cursor is when you're editing things, and it's a useful tool. Then we're going to hit Shift S after selecting this bone we just created, and hit Selection to Cursor. And now we have this bone here snapped to this. And we're going to do the same thing over here. I'm just going to add it again. Another bone, scale it down with S, move it somewhere in that general area, select this, cursor to selected, select this, selection to cursor. Okay, so now we have these two bones that are just kind of hanging out on the hands that we don't have, and we're going to click on them and give them names. Naming things is always a good idea in Blender. Luckily, our human meta rig that we used automatically names everything for you. See, we have thigh, left, etc. We're going to use a similar naming convention called this ik.hand.r for right. Now, this may look like the left to you, but our guy's facing towards us, so it's his right. ik.hand.l. Okay, now we're going to switch into pose mode and go into wireframe view. So we're going to come down here and select our hand, and we're going to go to this little thing next to where the names of the bones are. See, we have one with a bone, and we have a bone with a little chain next to it. These are our constraints, and we're going to do inverse schematics. Our target is the armature, and then we select the bone, which is our hand right. All right. For chain length, you can set it to however much you want it to control. So if you set the chain length to 0, it just controls everything. We don't want to give it that much power. We want to let it control down to, say, here. And then we go and do the same thing on the other side. Unfortunately, I don't know a quicker way to do this. Armature, hand left, and do the chain length again to there. All right, and since we're in pose mode, we can start trying this out right away. And you see now, we're able to move our guy just by pulling on these, as opposed to before where we were just twisting things like this. We're not going to do the legs right now or any of the other IKs, but as opposed to something like this, which is called forward schematics, we're doing something called inverse schematics, which usually gives a more realistic look. For example, we can have our guy bend over like this, just by moving his arm. And you see now he's going down to pick something up. Simple animations come from using inverse schematics. So now we've moved some things, but we want them to restore to their original positions, rotations, locations, scale, all that stuff. So select your mesh, and just how you use G to grab something, you use Alt-G to restore its positions, Alt-R to restore its rotations, and Alt-S to restore its scale. And so now everything's back to where it was. So we want to now give our guy some texture. He doesn't look like very much right now. We're going to switch to Cycles Render, which is what we're going to be using to render this. It's available in 2.5.3 and on, I believe. I'm not entirely sure. So we need to select our guy, and we're going to add something. We're going to add a floor. So we want to Shift S, cursor to center, which puts it right in the center of our scene, and then Shift A to go plane. Tab to edit mode, scale. If you go to the camera view, you can see how much you need to scale it. So if I do 10, is that enough? No, you see, because we still have some edges over there. So we're going to hit backspace and type a new number in. How about 15? Still not enough. How about 25? There we go. That's a good scale for this. And we're going to start creating a texture for it. So do that. We go into compositing in this little drop down here. So we have game logic, animation, all sorts of stuff like that. And we're going to go to this view. Now we want to click on materials, since we're creating a material for it, and click new over here. You can also click new down here, but I prefer to add materials in this view. And we're going to give it a name, because naming things is good, floor. Now you have this thing here. This is your compositor. And you see we just have a diffuse, which is just your basic color, going into the surface, and nothing else going on at all. Well, we're going to add a little something more, so Shift A, and here we have a different menu. We're going to add a texture. And I like checkerboards, personally. That's what we had in that other video. We're going to mix up the colors a little bit, though, and use something different. How about nice light blue? You see the color over there. Maybe a little more saturated blue. Light. Like there. And we're going to have it be black. And now you notice we don't actually see that texture down here at all. So to do that, we switch to rendered view. And you see now we have a checkerboard on the floor. Scale lets you decide how much, how frequent the texture repeats itself. And so we're going to do something like that. So that's a nice little texture. Now we're going to click, we're going to go back into our default view, right click on our guy, and then we're going to go into edit mode. So what we need to do right now is we need to use a multi-part material, multiple materials for one object. So we're going to name this one guy main, and then we're going to add guy pants. That's okay. And guy shirt. And I did it again. That's strange. So if it says use nodes here, you want to click that so it does use nodes. And then we're going to go and select everything. If you remember how to do that, you tap A and everything is selected. And we're going to hit assign. We're not actually going to do any of the actual materials at this moment. Then we're going to go to guy pants, and we want to go into wireframe view so we can select things behind it without messing with other settings. And see that we have everything selected on this leg. And also we're going to go up a little bit and select all these too. Guy pants. Okay. Now we want to give him a shirt. So we're going to select all these and these and these, and I'm just holding down the left mouse button, moving it around and selecting things. See, is that everything we want? You can go back and forth between edit and wireframe. You can see he has a little bit of a sleeve there. And assign guy shirt. So we're just going to do some basic colors for these. What we're going to do is go to rendered view. And we can do this here. You don't need the compositor. It's just a lot easier to understand things when they're laid out in the way it is. So for the main guy, what do you think? How about green? I don't remember what color I made him originally. And then his pants, I'll give him some nice orange pants. And his shirt, how about purple? Okay. And so you notice he's not very rounded. If you want to make him rounded, we can do that very quickly. We can go to our modifiers, which is where we added our mirror and our armature. Even though we didn't do it in this view, it shows up here. So add modifier, and we are going to select subdivision surface. Now what this does is it lets you set how many times you want your guy subdivided, which basically rounds edges is all it really does. And you see, even though we subdivided, he still has these blocks. If we don't want that, we can set him to smooth. Now he shows up smooth. So even if we hid the subdivision, if we got rid of it, he still appears a little bit smoother. You have to be careful with subdivisions because if you do too many, it'll slow down and potentially crash your computer. You can set a different amount for when you want it rendered and how you want it to show up in your viewport. So I'm going to leave it like this for now because I don't actually need it in my viewport. Z switches between, remember, our object and our edit. One thing you can do that helps see things a little better is you have this viewport color down in the settings here. So if you hover over your color, this is going to be unusual to anyone who's ever used a computer, and then hover over a viewport color and hit, or you hover over your color and hit Control C, hover over your viewport and hit Control V, and just do that for all of them. There's no right clicking or click and drag or anything like that. A lot of Blender just works by what you're hovering over. Just like how I can go to front view and top view and stuff if I'm hovering over this 3D view, but if I'm down here, it doesn't do anything. So now when we go to solid, we have colors that show up in the viewport, and we can do the same for this. I'll just give it this blue texture as what it'll show up as. So now we want to make an animation, right? To do this, first we're going to position our camera somewhere where we actually want it. So how about right in front of our guy, and then we'll just kind of rotate it around like this. Go to camera view, and if you hit RXX, we go into local X, which goes up and down, and RZ goes side to side. Useful tricks for working with the camera. And we can select our armature, front view, and start animating. So in that video that I showed you, I reduced the frame rate quite a bit so it would render faster. We have it set to 24 frames per second right now, which is fine. And ultimately, if we do 250 frames, it'll come out to about 10 seconds. So we want to start animating things. What we have to do is click this auto keyframe insertion button down here. It's a little red circle. And once you click that, then as soon as you move something, it's going to insert a keyframe for it. Make sure you're in pose mode, not edit mode. Otherwise, things won't bend and stuff. So now what we want to do is start animating. So we're just going to start here. And to do a keyframe without doing anything, press G or R or S, whichever one you want to put a keyframe for, and hit 0, and then enter. And you see now we have a keyframe showing up on our timeline. G is 0, because we're just going to be moving around IK bones. With these, you'd be rotating them if you were to animate them, but we're not doing that. So then go forward a little bit, maybe like in half a second. We're going to move this arm forward and this arm backward. Looks a little bit strange. You know, you can just play around with it. I'm just going to do something really quick. Nothing in particular. That'll move across, and then maybe, I don't know. I'm not actually sure what I'm doing. I don't have a goal or anything. Usually helps to have a goal when you're animating. And he moves like this, and then he moves like this. And we're going to add a little bit more animation. So you want to switch back to object mode, select your camera, hit G and then enter, R and then enter, and we're going to just rotate around the guy in a little bit. Move up here, and then we're going to start rotating around him. RZ to find him, RXX to look at him, And so we're just doing a little animation here. So if you look at it, you can press Alt-A when you're hovering over the 3D view, and that'll play your animation back to you. Now it's not rendered right now, so it looks a little bit simple, but that's all our animation is. And you have now created an entire animation, project, Blender, everything in just a little while. And if we hit F12, we do a render. You can also access these settings over here. There's one more thing that we want to talk about, and that's samples. If you go down to sampling, you can set how many samples you want to do. And if you notice, it's a little bit grainy, especially in these areas. If you set that higher, it takes longer to render, but gives you a better quality image. You see how it's sort of passing over it and making it better quality, enhancing it. So that's how working with Blender, cycles, animation, modeling, rigging, I don't even know what I'm forgetting, materials, textures, lighting. We didn't actually do any lighting, but we just used the default light. And you have made an animation. So thank you, and go find some other Blender videos, tutorials. I haven't made any yet, but I might if there's anything you want me to focus on more, because I just went on a brief overview of everything. So if there's anything that needs to be touched upon, let me know, and I will make another video about it. Thank you, and I'll see you next time.